Very important to encounter families today. Encounter is to create a culture of encounter. And we've been hearing that in its current Catholic theology, but it holds true, especially when we're talking about family catechesis. How do we create a culture of encounter, right? We want to meet families where they are. And we have to recognize that families are different than they have been in the past. And we could even consider calling them households because the family structure has taken on so many different characteristics. But saying that we need to meet families where they are, what does that mean? We need to consider the commitments that families have, the busy lives. And there are two sides to this consideration. One is that they need to set church as priority and put everything else aside. And we've done that for some time and possibly had that attitude, which often results in families not participating in our activities. So I think the other side of that coin is that we say we can actually recognize that you have other commitments that are important and we value the other decisions that you make and we encourage you to participate in our programs. And in fact, we're going to support you by trying to adapt the way that we do things. In other words, our expectations may need to change so that we can really support the families who do have other commitments that conflict with their traditional schedules. That's one example of meeting them where they are. Another example might be the attitudes that they hold. We know that we're dealing with a challenged generation that may not understand church teachings. And when we're talking about family catechesis, and we're often wanting to move the entire program into the household, we're expecting them to carry the weight of the teachings and the communication with the child and setting the examples that's necessary to form their child in the faith. And that can be extremely difficult for many of the parents that are out there. So we have to accept that and find ways to support them. So one way might be to make sure that we're offering clear materials, the presentation of the faith that we expect them to address with their children. If it's in print, that's fine. If there are any digital components that we're expecting them to engage with, then we need to take the time to help them learn how to use it. It's extremely important. And I think we learned that over the pandemic. We gathered together resources and then we sort of dumped them on the and expected them just to take it and run with it. And sometimes it's not that easy to do. So we need to accompany our parents. So we recognize where they are and try to meet them, but then we need to accompany them along the way. So, how do we accompany these families, these parents and the children? Well, one way is holding their hand and saying, here are the resources, here's the expectation, and be very clear about the expectations. That generally results in better participation when the receiver of the information is very clear on what you're asking them to do, accompanying them with showing them how to use the resources. Again, print resources or digital resources, making sure they understand that and making sure that the child understands how to use the resources and what the expectations are. Because in many cases that I heard and people that I communicated with during the pandemic, that wasn't always made clear. We did our job of at least getting them resources, but we need to do a better job often of making sure they understand what those expectations are. The result of that is going to provide that culture of encounter where they feel prepared, they feel supported, and they're more likely to then engage with the resources. And then a third way that I'd like to mention is that we think about the role of the catechist, or in this case, someone who can support the family. So maybe a classroom catechist can take on a different role as a supporter of a group of families, perhaps, and really work with those parents to make sure that they're understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I thought you did a great job introducing it, Steve, really calling out the primary issue, which is we all know the family is the nucleus of the church. We call it the domestic church. It's really where God's covenantal love and life is experienced and practiced and shared. And so we want to make sure we support and resource and accompany families or households, that might be more appropriate to say, but how to do that. And I think, as you mentioned, sort of the misstep that so many dioceses and parishes often take is that they put something together and then they give it to the family or household and expect them to use it. And we know that one, we're fighting an uphill battle against a lot of apathy, religious apathy. We're in an incredibly secularized culture, which only makes that challenge more intense. It amplifies it more. It's hard to look around in your daily life and see signals and signs of people following their faith and people of good character and good moral fiber. And it's even hard to have a civilized discussion these days. Everything is so polarized, so intense or intensified, amplified. It's a very difficult sort of context for families to practice their faith. So we do need to do what we can do to support and help faith grow inside those households, strengthen those domestic churches, but we have to do it in steps. And I go back to in the directory, the new directory, and any directory preceding it, 1971, 1995, or 97, any of those general directories, talk about this divine pedagogy, how God sort of slowly, gradually unfolds, discloses himself or reveals himself over time. And that's obviously with purpose. We can't receive God's fullness all at once. You know, it's steps, it's baby steps. Imagine, you know, my wife Stacy's very much into gardening, just picked it up. We're doing a lot of box gardening, and you cannot just turn on the hose full blast and just water these pots. I mean, these flowers, these herbs, these vegetables are going to drown. You know, they're not going to take root. It's too much. And that's often what happens in the classroom when we have unevangelized young people in front of us, and then we're talking about the mysteries of the faith when they haven't even made an option for the faith yet. They don't even have something. I'm going to refer to what Jesus said, the pearl of great price, or the treasure hidden in the field, which, let me tell you what that is, friends. Specifically, that treasure hidden in the field, and where your treasure is, there your heart will be, is that it is the absolute, without qualification, experience of having encountered God. When you have that, and it comes in all shapes and sizes and forms, God comes to us personally. When you have that, that's when you begin that personal faith journey. And that's what is the foundation, whether you're a young person or an older person, onto which we start talking about the mysteries of the faith that we experience along that journey: sacraments, fellowship, prayer, moral life, serving one another. All these things build around it. So, but we got to take these baby steps. And Steve made another important point. We have to try to evangelize, and we're going to get that in our next block here, evangelize adults, mom and dads, before we can talk about family catechesis. Because family catechesis, again, has this presupposition that mom and or dad are already evangelized and they're already into their faith and they're going to share their faith. We can't make that presumption. So we really have to focus on adult faith formation and easing people into that experience, making sure that they have that sort of infallible, unqualified, irreproachable encounter with Jesus, that they know no matter what happens in their life, God is with them, they've encountered him, God loves them. Steve?
So many good points that you made, Deacon Matt.
Well, thanks. I make 1 or 2 good points a year, so I've already met my quota, so I'm signing off. No.
We've got 2 of them here today.